So, hello learners, we'll wait for 5 minutes so that other participants can also join, and then we'll start today's session. So, hello everyone, and welcome to this fourth session. So, I'll just share my screen and we'll begin the today's session. So, I hope my presentation is visible to all of you, right? So, now in today's session, first we'll discuss some of the answers for the remaining questions of week 3. And then today's topics are climate change and the related aspects. right? So let us first begin this session with the week 3 MCQs. So I gave you 3 to 4 questions as home assignments, and I hope that you have come today with answers. So the first question was regarding the final energy and useful energy. So I explained you how we go from the energy resources up to the useful energy at the user end, right? So uh, final energy is the energy which is converted in the end devices into useful forms of energy. So you had to identify which of the following is an example of useful energy. So either it is a mechanical energy which may be delivered by an industrial electric motor or the heat of a household radiator, right? So I already explained to you in the previous session that how the global energy system, it starts from the primary energy sources like coal, and how they are converted into secondary energy, and then finally they are transformed through the conversion technologies into the useful energy. Okay, so which of these is an example of useful energy? Either it is A, B, or only the second option, that is heat of a household radiator, or both A and B. So I'll just see if any of you have answered the question. I see there are 12 participants. So, and some of the people are still joining. So we are discussing about the assignment questions or the leftover remnant MCQs of the week 3. Fine. So I see nobody has answered the question. So, like in the previous session, I told you how this is a global energy system. Okay, so it's just a quick recap for you. So I explained you how we go from these energy resources like coal mines, sun, oil or gas, and how this primary energy is converted through these certain technologies into secondary energy like electricity, gas, like ethanol, okay, and how they are finally converted into the final energy. Then this final energy is converted to useful energy. So in the previous session, we had an elaborate discussion on this certain example, that how the resources from coal, how it is getting converted into useful energy in the form of electricity, and the service being provided is information processing in case of when the technology is computer, right? So this was already discussed in quite detail in the last session. So the question here is, which of the following is a useful energy? Mechanical energy or the heat of a household radiator? So the correct answer to this question will be D. That is both A and B. Okay. So now that you have already, like we have already just discussed about this. So the second question is also on the same concept. You had to select the odd option with respect to energy services. So these energy services, these are simply the services which are available at the user end. Okay. So like cooking or illumination, what is the end service which you are getting from that particular kind of energy form? So that is energy service. So which one of these is not an energy service? So mobility is a service, thermal comfort is an energy service, and illumination is also an energy service. So the answer will be none of the above. Okay, so already this all is given in the diagram like illumination, mobility, thermal comfort. So if you would have just gone through through the lecture, you would have understood the question and even obtained the answer. Now this is a very simple question. If you have not attempted it, I would request you to do it right now and give me the answer. So I expect all of you would be able to do this. I asked you what amount of work will be done if you pull out a 60 nail with an average force of 450 Newton, right? So I expect you all to just solve this question right now. It's just a 1 minute direct calculation, right? So you have to calculate the work done when you are pulling out a 60 nail and The force given is 450 Newton. So what will be the work done? So just provide the answers in the chat box, right? So what work will be done? We discussed about the different units of energy. Then we discussed about work and power also in the last session. So you just have to calculate the work done. You are provided with the distance and with the force. So I've already given you too much this explanation. I'll just see if somebody of you have answered the question. Okay, so I see some people are attentive in the sessions. So one student has answered 5th D and 7th C. Okay, 5th D. Right. 7th C. So we have obtained an answer that is 27 joules. So only one student is paying attention and doing fine. The rest of you have just joined the session for namesake. So I encourage you to at least be attentive in the class and be interactive, right? Okay, so we'll just resume. Right, so the correct answer is 27 joules because work done is directly force into the distance. So you just convert the 60 millimeter into meters and you will get the answer as 27 joules. So the correct answer for this question is C. Okay. Now the last question was you had to choose the odd one with respect to global warming potential. So global warming potential was the potential of any gas or the ability of any gas to cause global warming, and it is measured with respect to carbon dioxide. Okay, so if it is measured with respect to carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide is taken as 1 because it is a reference. So the correct answer for this will be, okay, so this answer provided is incorrect. Correct answer will be A, right? So this is not 100, this will be 1. Okay, now moving towards the today's topic. So today's topic is a little bit theoretical, but it is very important in today's era, right? Climate change. We all are dealing with climate change in our day-to-day lives. And then followed by climate change, we'll study something about UNFCCC and India. Okay, so these are the bodies which are related to climate change. So climate change, I hope you all would be very much familiar with this term. So it is the long-term changes in the temperature or the weather patterns. So when we talk about weather, it is the short-term changes or the day-to-day changes, and climate is considered over a long period of time, right? Now since 1800s, human activities are the major driver of climate change. So mostly all the damage which is being done to the environment, so mostly it is now being due to the anthropogenic activities or the man-made activities. Now we already studied that energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture and land use, these are the main GHG emitters. So these are again causing global warming, and when we have global warming, that is again leading to climate change. Okay, again clearing land and forests, they release carbon dioxide, landfills release methane. So there are innumerable processes which are contributing towards climate change. Now when you are having climate change, you see there is pollution, then there is disruption to the vegetation, or the glaciers are melting, or there is rise in the sea level. So there are different effects of climate change. Now these are some statistical data which shows you how serious this concern of climate change is. So Earth, when we talk about the global average temperature, so when we talk about the average global temperature, Earth is now 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than it was in the late 1800s. And the last decade, which is 2011 to 20, that has been recorded as the warmest decade till now. Okay, so you can see the temperature changes in the last 50 years through this figure here. You can see how the changes, how the temperature is changing, right? Now during 2010, why this is the warmest decade? Because the annual GHG emissions have been observed as the maximum. Okay, so if these are maximum, ultimately the climate change would be, the effect on climate would be very severe. So now what is required? We have to limit around limiting to around 1.5 degrees Celsius. It requires global GHG emissions to peak before 2025 and be reduced by 43% by 2030. So we all know that the major goal when we talk about climate change and the mitigation patterns, so the major goal is that we have to limit this warming to around 1.5 degrees Celsius. So for that, it is required that the emissions are reduced by 43% by 2030. So drastic changes in the lifestyle, drastic improvement in the renewable energy reforms, policy transformations, everything is required, because if cumulative and integrated efforts will be made, then only you can achieve such kind of targets. Right? And effects of climate change are very severe. It is not only associated with temperature rise, but you are also having, you see nowadays there is increased droughts, or there is increased floods. Okay, so these extreme things which are observed, it is because of the climate change. Right? So I hope you have understood the concept, and you must have already been familiar with the concept of this climate change. Now you see there are many international organizations or international bodies which prepare different kind of reports. Okay, so these reports are a basis for, first of all, they disseminate the existing knowledge on that topic to the general public. Secondly, they lay a path for future mitigation measures. Okay, so for example, the first report here, this was prepared in 2002. So all these three reports are prepared in 2002. These are the IPCC reports. Okay, that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You see that in each report, major um, significance is given to GHG. Right? For example, it is said that if the global warming is as the global warming is increasing, so emission reduction pledges for 2030 needs to be 7 times higher. Okay, if we want to achieve our goal to limit the global warming to 1.5 degree, which we discussed earlier, so for that case, you have to take such decisions that the emissions are reduced by 7 times. So this is the amount of uh, reforms or the changes that are required to combat this climate change. Similarly, the another report that is by IPCC, it again states that if the immediate and deep emission reductions are not done across all sectors, not only for CO2 but also for methane and also for other GHGs, so all GHGs have to be reduced drastically in all sectors, be it transport, transport, energy, waste. So from all sectors, these emission reductions have to be achieved if we want to achieve our aim of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, we have to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, achieving this aim is beyond reach. So, and again, the IPCC. So there are different sub organizations of this, or sub bodies of this IPCC. They prepare reports on different domains. Like this is prepared on mitigation of climate change. Then another one talks about impacts. So this report states that it is causing dangerous disruption not only to the environment but also to the population. So that is well known how climate change is affecting different flora, fauna, and the human life as well. Right? So the main uh, takeaway message of these reports is that if we want to achieve our target to reduce to limit the global warming for 1.5 degrees Celsius, then immediate reductions are required for all GHGs across all sectors. Right? So now moving towards the causes of climate change. So when we talk about climate change, it is well known that the major cause is fossil fuels. So fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas, these are the largest contributor to global climate change. and they account for 75% of the global GHG emissions and 90% of all the CO2 emissions. So we can see that maximum CO2 emissions, that is 90%, it is coming from the fossil fuels only. Fine. Now the main categories of this causes is through generating power. So that is again linked to fossil fuels because we are burning coal, oil or gas for power generation, and that is releasing certain kind of GHGs, and these GHGs will ultimately cause climate change. Right? When we talk about manufacturing goods, so mostly these fossil fuels are burned to produce the energy that is required for manufacturing cement, iron, steel or electronics. So ultimately it is again linked to the fossil fuels, right? When we talk about industry, so again in mining and other industrial processes, they release gases. Plus the machines, they are often machines which are involved in the industry, so they are often running on fossil fuels like coal, oil or gas, or the machines are having some components which are again made from the fossil fuels. So the ultimate source is fossil fuels. So that is why the power generation, good manufacturing or the emissions from industries, these are all interrelated with the fossil fuel uh, combustion. Okay. Now, if you see, the manufacturing industry is the largest contributor to GHG worldwide, because in the manufacturing industry, first of all, the for the raw prepare if you are manufacturing something, so the raw materials which are to be used, that are again somewhere related to fossil fuel burning. Similarly, the machines that may be running, they may also be running on the fossil fuels. So that is why the manufacturing industry overall, it is the largest, one of the biggest contributors to global GHG emissions. So apart from this, deforestation. So deforestation is a very serious issue, and basically the forests are cut down to either create farms or pastures, right? But when they are cut down, they release the carbon that has been stored in their biomass. So you see, each year approximately 12 million hectares of forest are destroyed. So deforestation, and along, if there is deforestation, there will be a change in the land use, because earlier it may have been it was used for plantation purpose, or it was a forest, and now that has been changed and it is used for maybe creating farms or some kind of construction purpose. So deforestation plus land use, they are responsible for a quarter of global GHG emissions, because you are not only creating another source of GHG, but also the carbon that was stored, that has also been released now, right? So that is why deforestation is another major contributor. So it contributes a quarter of global GHG emissions. Now another cause of climate change is transportation, obviously. So basically all the cars, trucks, ships and all the vehicles, they run on petroleum based products. So due to the combustion, again there will be CO2 emissions. So that is why the transport accounts for nearly one quarter of global GHG. So a quarter is by deforestation, and transportation also accounts for a quarter of global GHG emissions, right? So most of the sources, they are linked to fossil fuel combustion. Now when we talk about food production, so even the food production industry, they can emit GHGs. So how it is emitted? For example, for producing food, you require some land. Now you are cutting down the trees to convert that land into a farm. So there you are contributing to the GHG emission. Then there is digestion by the cows. So during the ruminant fermentation, again you will be releasing GHGs. If you're using fertilizer, so fertilizer production would obviously be associated with some emissions, and the use will also be associated. So like this, the entire food production chain or the system, it will be associated with a lot of emissions. And not only the production, but again if you talk about packaging and distributing, there will be different sources. of emissions, right? So food production is again associated with GHG emissions, particularly CO2 and methane. Now, when we talk about powering buildings, so in the semi-urbans or the urban areas, the residential and commercial buildings, they consume half of the entire electricity. So again, how the electricity is produced, it is interrelated to the fossil fuel combustion, right? So that is why most of the it has been said that the major contributor is the fossil fuels, that is your coal, oil and gas, and they are contributing 75% of global GHG and 90% of all CO2 emissions. So main causes will be power generation, almost all the major process, power generation, good manufacturing, from industry and transportation, then again from deforestation, food production and powering your buildings, where the major contributor is your manufacturing industry. So these are the different causes of climate change. So I hope you have understood what is climate change and how this climate change is caused, right? Now, yeah, this is the main cause is consuming too much. So the human needs are increasing day by day, and it is becoming impossible for the nature to cater to those demands and needs, right? So the main cause is there is too much consumption. Nothing is sufficient, okay? It's always less. So you're consuming too much. Your home, that will also contribute to GHG emissions. How you are moving around. For example, there are four people in a house and they are using four different vehicles. So you are not carpooling. So that is again a you are increasing the emissions of GHGs. What you are eating, how much food waste you are producing. So everything can be associated to emissions of GHGs, right? So you see, it has been observed that the richest 1% of global population, they combined account for more GHG emissions than the poorest 50%. So the richest 1% population in the world, its GHG emission is equivalent to the poorest 50%. That's such a large number. So as your lifestyle improves, you are associated with a lot of processes that emit GHGs, right? So that is why the lifestyle also matters a lot. And a large chunk of global GHG emissions, it can be linked to the private households. Now, after covering the causes, we'll move towards the effects of climate change. So effects of climate change can be the most common example. So it can be seen in our day-to-day lives. We are seeing that the temperature in the summers are rising very high. Similarly, the winters are getting much colder. Plus, there is a change in the patterns of the winters and summers, right? Then for example, in India, there are certain regions which are facing a lot of droughts, increased droughts incidents, and then in some places there is increased floods, right? So these are all the indications that climate change is happening, right? And not only this, these kinds of phenomena, they are also taking a toll on the human health. Okay. So what are the major effects of climate change? First is obviously hotter temperatures. So we see that since 1980s, each decade has been warmer than the previous one. So this is such an alarming statistic that since the 1980s, there has not been a decline in the temperature, right? So the temperature is increasing day by day. Most of the areas, they are seeing more hot days and heat waves, and subsequently this higher temperature not only affects the human health, it is also associated with forest fires, wildfires and the heat related illnesses, right? So you see, if there is a change in one parameter, that will affect the plant life, animal life and the human life, that will ultimately affect directly or indirectly, right? So the first and foremost effect is the increase in temperature. After temperature, there are more severe storms. So obviously, if the temperature is rising, more moisture is going to evaporate, and that will again exhibit extreme rainfall and flooding. So ultimately there will be destructive storms, right? Similarly, when there is increased storms, so consequently there will be increased droughts as well. And now it is seen very much in the Indian subcontinent also. So how the droughts are affecting the crops, and they are also destroying, the economics of the rural population. And again, the drought will also consequently lead to storms. There is not enough food. So one of the most severe impact of climate change is reduction in food availability. So when there is extreme weather events, so we nowadays we are seeing extreme weather, too much heat, too much cold, too much rainfall. So due to this, there is damage to the crops. So food production is getting hampered, and there is subsequently global rise in hunger and poor nutrition. So you see fisheries, crops and livestock, they are getting destroyed or they are becoming less productive. Now the another impact is the ocean is becoming more acidic. Okay, so more resources are at risk. Similarly, if we talk about the ice covered regions in the Arctic, so there is disrupted food supplies. Okay, so the heat stress, when if there is too much of water, too much rainfall, that is also destructive. And if there are increased droughts, then also crop production will be hampered. So these extreme weather events are hampering the food production and increasing the uh, food this increasing the hunger and poor nutrition worldwide, right? So we see there is changes in the warming and rising of ocean. So there is change in the ocean dynamics. Why ocean is so important? Because it absorbs most of the heat from global warming. But the ocean is now getting strongly, its temperature is increasing not only on the surface but across all depths. So due to increase in temperature, obviously you all know the volume will expand, right? So that is why there is melting ice sheets, there is rise in the sea level, which is threatening the coastal communities. Okay. Plus, how the ocean acidification is taking place, because ocean is absorbing a lot of CO2 from the atmosphere. So although it is acting as a CO2 sink, but it is getting acidic. So if it is getting acidic, it is again endangering the aquatic life. Okay, and maybe the people who are dependent on that aquatic um, ecosystem for food, right? So this is why all the things are interrelated to one another. So apart from this, so these effects were basically the changes in the, for example, your uh, weather patterns or your climatic changes, this changes in the temperature, storms, or increased rainfalls, increased droughts. Now, when we talk about the human perspective, or when we relate it to the human health, we see there are more health risks. So as we discussed, the food production chain is getting hampered. So obviously there will be poor nutrition and increased hunger worldwide. So then there will be lot of diseases, and the healthcare systems are now failing to cope up with the number of increase in the number of this increase in the number of diseases worldwide, right? Now again, due to the extreme events, extreme heat, extreme cold, it takes a toll on the human body. Okay, and there is an increase in the um, different kind of illnesses. So after this health risk, there is also poverty and displacement. So when we talk about floods or droughts, not only the crop production is getting hampered, but if we talk about let's say floods, so uh, the inhabitants of a particular area, they have to then move to the other area. So it destroys a lot of lives, lot of homes, and the water scarcity. If there is a scarcity, it will affect crops. So the economics also goes down. So you see that in between 2010 to 19, that is the last decade, weather-related events displaced an estimated 23.1 million people each year. So that is quite a huge number, that 23.1 million people were displaced in a single year just because of weather related events. And this was during the entire decade. Right? Then apart from all these things, there is also an effect on the ecosystem fauna. So there is loss of species. World is losing species at a rate of 1,000 times greater than any other in the recorded human history. So we see that approximately 1 million species are at risk of becoming extinct. So this is all because the species or the fauna, they are not able to cope up with the rise in temperature or extreme rainfall or your this dust storms or changes in the climatic conditions. So that is why these species are getting extinct. So these are the different effects of climate change: hotter temperatures, severe storms, extreme weather conditions, increased rain, increased drought. There is hampering in the food production, due to which there is health related illnesses. Then you have poverty and displacement, and ultimately species loss as well. Okay, so these are the major effects of climate change. Now when we talk about climate change, we have to mention UNFCCC. So what is this? This is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it is the legal body which works on a global scale, and its main aim is to combat or to tackle climate change by aiming GHG control and management. Okay, so this was adopted in 1992 and came into force in 1994. So this is basically a global body that is aiming to work on that aims to tackle climate change through GHG control and mitigation. So at approximately 189 countries or 189 nations are parties to this convention. So these countries are divided into two parts. Like, okay, so here you can see it is divided into two annexes, Annex 1 and 2. So one is the countries which are obliged to take measures to mitigate the effects of climate change. And secondly, there are certain countries which are developed countries, so they have to provide, obliged means they have to, it is necessary for them to provide financial support to developing countries so that they can achieve this aim. Okay. So there are some countries, Annex 1 countries, which are obliged to take measures because usually the developing countries are they have higher GHG emissions. So they have to, plus they require financial support to control and mitigate GHG emissions. So they are obliged to certain to achieve GHG emissions at certain limit. So that is called as nationally NDCs, nationally determined contributions. So you are supposed to achieve this much reduction. Okay, and the Annex 2 countries will give you financial support for achieving that. Now you all must have heard about Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol is very famous. It is an instrument which is affiliated to UNFCCC. So it requires the developed countries to limit their GHG emissions and provides methods on how emission reduction can be achieved, how you can measure it, and how you can verify it. So Kyoto Protocol is an affiliated instrument of the UNFCCC. Overall goal of the Kyoto Protocol or overall goal of UNFCCC, it is to protect the climate system for benefit of the present and for the future generations as well. So it is aiming on sustainability, right? Now, when we talk about UNFCCC, there is an institutional framework and this is the organization of the convention. So you have UN General Assembly at the top, then you have UNEP and WMO, and again we have IPCC. So these are different bodies. This just shows that this is headed, the head is the UN General Assembly, and in this we have IPCC and UNFCCC, right? Now when we talk about UNFCCC, the decision making power is the conference of the parties. So this is held every year. The most famous is COP21, where the decision was made to limit reductions to 1.5 degree. So that is very famous. You must have heard about it, right? So what is COP? It is a supreme decision making body of the convention. All states which are part of the convention, they will be represented as a COP, right? So, and it basically takes decisions to promote effective implementation of the aim and goal of convention. So it will include all the parties which are members of the convention, and it is the major or the supreme decision making party of decision making body of UNFCCC. So the latest conference of parties was the COP26 at Glasgow, Scotland in United Kingdom. So that this was held last year in 2021. This year it is, I think, in Egypt. It is in Egypt, I think, during November, right? So this is a COP26. So they just meet each year and they discuss what are the how much emissions have been achieved and what decisions are to be made, right? So why COP26 came into limelight? It was because a new deal that is known as the Glasgow Climate Pact. So that was done during this conference of parties, right? So this they reaffirmed the COP21, that is the Paris Agreement statement. So that this is the main aim of, this is the main, you can say, outcome of the Paris Agreement. So what the Paris Agreement said, that we have to hold this increase in global average temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, and to 1.5 above, and pursuing efforts to limit it to 1.5. So the main outcome of Paris Agreement, that is COP21, was we have to limit this temperature increase to 1.5 degree Celsius. Okay. So this in COP26, this statement was again highlighted, signifying its importance that this has to be done if we want to tackle climate change timely. Okay. Plus, a new pact was made, that is the Glasgow Climate Pact. Now, what the another major outcome was limiting this global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It is fine. They have identified that you have to limit it to 1.5. But if you want to limit it, that requires rapid, deep, and sustained reduction in GHG emissions by and CO2 emissions by 45%. So this has already been discussed in the previous slide, right? So we have to reduce this by 45% by 2030. Now, the main striking or the new thing in the COP26 was it mentioned for the first time that coal is the single biggest contributor to climate change. Before COP26, it was not mentioned anywhere that which fossil fuel, or let's say fossil fuel, is the biggest contributor. But in COP26, it was clearly mentioned that coal is the biggest contributor to climate change. And a pact was made that we have to explicitly plan to reduce unabated coal power. So this was the major, noteworthy outcome or noteworthy event in the COP26, that we have to explicitly deal with reduction of coal, usage of coal. So that is because it is the single biggest contributor to climate change. And in the COP26, India promised to draw half of its energy from renewable by 2030. So India promised that by 2030, that is after 8 years, it will draw half of its energy by renewable, and it will achieve carbon neutrality by 2070. Now, when we talk about the Indian scenario, what are the biennial update reports? So these BURs, these are reports which are submitted biennially by non-NX1 parties, and they contain updates of national GHG inventories and information on mitigation actions, needs, and supports received. So biennial update reports, they are submitted to UNFCCC, they are submitted by India as well, and they contain information about the Indian GHG emissions, a national GHG inventory, Then information on the mitigation actions and the support that has been received. So recently, the third Indian biennial report has been submitted in 2021. So these are the key highlights. So India is implementing one of the largest renewable energy expansion programs. So nowadays we see a lot of programs that are promoting renewable energy, development and use of renewable energy. So it has a target of achieving 1.175 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 22 and later up to 450 gigawatt. Secondly, the installed capacity of solar energy in India, it has increased by more than 14 times. So we see a lot of development has taken in India in the solar energy phase. Because from 2014, it was 2.63 gigawatt and now in 2020, it is 36.9, which is approximately 37. So 37 gigawatt in 2020. So a lot of development has taken in the solar energy domain. Now, when we talk about wind energy, up to 2020, wind energy was 38 gigawatt, that is approximately equivalent to solar. Then the cumulative renewable energy has increased by 2.6 times. And apart from all these, the tree cover has also increased. So tree cover also helps us to reduce GHG as they are the very good carbon sinks. So these are the key highlights how India is progressing towards achieving carbon neutrality and how India is aiming or going towards reduction in GHG emissions. Now, one of the important body in India regarding climate change is National Action Plan on Climate Change, that is NAPCC. It was launched in 2008. So it has 8 different missions under its under this its aims and scope. So there is National Solar Mission, Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency, Sustainable Habitat, Water Mission, Mission for a Green India, Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem, Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change, and Sustainable Agriculture. So you see all domains have been included in these 8 missions of NAPCC. We have solar energy, then we have energy efficiency, water, green India, even the Himalayan ecosystem and the agriculture. So these missions, they try to combat this climate change and they identify the measures and advances a country development towards climate change related objectives, right? So this is just to provide you a brief intro about the NAPCC's missions. So solar mission is basically, as the name suggests, it is to make solar, increase the development of solar energy in the country. And you have to make it competitive with the fossil based options. So it is the monitoring agency is or ministry is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, that is MNRE. When we talk about enhanced energy efficiency, so this is based on an Energy Conservation Act of 2001 and it provides a mandate for implementation of energy efficiency measures. So since it is dealing with energy efficiency, obviously it will be under the Ministry of Power. Now, it talks not only about energy and renewables, it also talks about sustainable habitat. So the main aim is to make the habitat sustainable through improvement in energy efficiency, management of waste, model shift to public transport. So it talks about three main ways to achieve a sustainable habitat, and it is under the Ministry of Urban Development. When we talk about water mission, so it has been revealed that by 2050 India is likely to become water scarce. So you see there is a huge need to conserve water, minimize wastage, enhance the treatment and reuse and recycle of the treated water. So this is another mission which is included in NAPCC. After this, you have to sustain the Himalayan ecosystem. So Himalayan ecosystem provides us with a lot of ecosystem services, and increase in temperature and changes in the precipitation or the weather conditions, it is obviously posing a threat to this Himalayan ecosystem. So In this mission, they aim to engage the local communities, for especially the panchayats, for managing the ecological resources within the Himalayan ecosystem. And it is under the Ministry of Science and Technology. When we talk about mission for a green India, so obviously it aims to increase the carbon sinks, right? And it is under Ministry of Environment and Forest, because if we increase the carbon sinks, it will help us in achieving GHG emissions, help us in achieving reduction in GHG emissions. Then again, when we talk about sustainable agriculture, we have to take sustainable approaches for producing newer varieties of crops that are resistant to the climate change. Then we have to go for alternative cropping patterns. We have to use sustainable fertilizers. Okay, and so this is under the Ministry of Agriculture. So you have to just reduce, avoid, or find alternatives to all the processes that may contribute towards GHG emissions in the agriculture domain. Now, followed by this, you have National Mission on Strategic Knowledge. Now, to achieve all these things, you have to have a knowledge base for regarding climate change, effects of climate change, causes of climate change, why it is such a big issue, why it is required, why we have to take action to combat it, right, to tackle it. So there is a mission on strategic knowledge of climate change. So it works. This mission is in this mission, the aim is to work on a global level and get engaged in the research and technology and improve international collaborations when we talk about the climate change. So this is again under Ministry of Science and Technology. So these are the different missions, 8 different missions through which India is trying to tackle the problem of climate change, and it was launched in 2008. So in today's session, we first discussed about climate change, then what are the causes and effects of climate change. Then we move towards the international body, that is UNFCCC. Then how UNFCCC, the latest meeting, that is the COP26, why it is important. Then we move towards the Indian scenario. What is the report that India submit to the UNFCCC? That is your biennial update report. And within India, there is a body, that is NAPCC, which helps us to tackle the which will help India to tackle the climate change, right? So after this session, these are some question and answers. So I'll suggest you take these down for or I think we have 10 questions. We can discuss 2 or 3 questions, and rest you can do it as home assignments, right? So first question is, which of the following best describe the term weather? Day-to-day changes in the atmosphere, long-term pattern in the climate, measured over many years, or wind and rain. So which of these best describes the term weather? So for understanding all these things, you have to have a very clear conception, a very clear difference between weather and climate. So please post your answers in the chat box if you have any answers. Okay, can you please, there is some student is having doubt in question number 8 of last week. Fine, I'll go through that. Okay, so most of you have written option A. Right. So the correct answer is day-to-day changes in the atmosphere, because if we talk about long term, it will be climate. Which of the following best describes the term climate? Day-to-day changes considered over long time, it's freezing today, or precipitation. So which of these will be considered will best describe the term climate? Okay, B, right. So when we are talking about climate, the first thing is to consider over long time. The third question is, dash is a pattern of dash over time. So which will come? Climate or weather, weather or climate, climate or global warming, or weather or global warming. So these are very simple questions. These just to test your concept. Let me see if any one of you has the answer. Okay, some have written B, some have written A, 2B, 3B. Yeah, 2 is B. I think I'll suggest you to read a question again. Yeah. So most of you have given the correct answer. So climate is obviously pattern of weather over time. Because when we talk about day-to-day changes, that is weather. And when we consider weather over a long period of time, that gives you climate. Fine. So the next question is, select the incorrect option with respect to effects of climate change. So which of these is not the effect of climate change? Intense drought, water scarcity, reducing sea levels, or increasing floods. So which of the following will be incorrect when we talk about climate change effects? Increased droughts, increased floods, reduced sea levels, or water scarcity? Okay, there is one answer for question 4th. Fine. So yes, some students have written C. The correct answer is C, obviously. Reducing sea levels, because the sea levels are rising. So as I told you, the this temperature is rising. So ocean temperature is rising, then the volume is expanding and sea levels are rising. So it is not reducing, right? So the correct answer is C. Which is among the largest contributors of global climate change? Deforestation, fertilizer use, manufacturing industry, or transportation? So among all these four, which is the largest contributor of global climate change? That is, which of these is giving your global maximum GHG emissions or ultimately leading to global climate change? Okay, some has written C. Yeah, so it will not be A, it will be C, because deforestation is a contributor, but major contributor is manufacturing industry. We already discussed it in the session. So I'll just go through the next 5 questions. You have to do it on your own, right? If you don't do it, then you answer it during the same time in the next session. But I expect answers, right? So sixth question is, which of the following contributes to energy related CO2 emissions from building? Energy demand for heating and cooling, electricity consumption for lighting and appliances, rising air conditioner ownership, only A and B, or all of the above. So which of these will contribute to energy related emissions from the buildings? You have to identify the factors. Next question is, which of the following is not a measure to protect climate change? Use of renewable and non-renewable energy source, protection of GHG sink and reservoir, reduction of transport and waste management, or policy reforms to support GHG limits and reductions. So which of these will not work when we try to protect the climate system? So this is a very straightforward question. You have to identify which of the following is not a mission under NPCC. Then which ministry has undertaken the National Mission for Green India? So that is also a direct question. You have to identify the ministry which is under which this National Mission for Green India is there. So it is a part of, this national mission is part of NPCC. Last question is, which of these actions will help you to lessen the impact of climate change? So these are different activities like biking, carpooling, saving water, reducing food waste, getting involved with the community or local governments. So which of these will help you to lessen the impact of climate change, right? So these 5 questions are to be answered by you as a home assignment, and we'll discuss it in the next session. Okay, I see there is some eight doubts in the eighth question. So you were talking about eighth question of last week, right? Yeah, so we have to choose. Acha, okay, fine, fine. We have to choose the odd one out with respect to global warming. Okay, I gave you the correct answer during the session. Yeah, so the answer is correct. This is not incorrect. The answer is correct because we have to select the odd one, right? So I thought it is you have to select the correct option. So this is correct. For carbon dioxide is 1. Then for methane it is 21, this is also correct. For nitrous oxide it is 310, this is also correct. So initially I planned to frame this question so that this CO2 is equal to 1 is correct. So that is why. So I may have mistaken, correct, this is the correct answer, and global warming potential for CO2 is 100, this is incorrect, so this will be the odd one out, right? For carbon dioxide it is 1, for methane it is 21, for nitrous oxide it is 310. So this answer provided is correct. So I hope this solves your doubt. Okay, again you have some, okay, 8th question of this week. See, you can always go through these questions. You can, I hope these slides will be shared with you, and you can always go through the YouTube session and you can take a screenshot of the questions, right? So the 8th question is, which of the following is not a mission under NAPCC? National Solar Mission, Water Mission, Mission for a Green India, or National Mission on Sustainable Development? So this is your 8th question for this week. 6th question is, you have to just take a screenshot, right? If you're not able to write it down, or if you're having some issues to go and check through the YouTube session, just take a screenshot. You have to identify which will contribute to energy related CO2 emission from building. In the next question, you have to identify the measure to protect the climate system. Then the mission under NAPCC. Then you have to identify which ministry is having the national mission for Green India. And in the last, you have to identify the actions that will help you to reduce climate change impacts. Right? So I hope all of your doubts are clear. And if you have any other doubt, I have already discussed 8th question of last week. And again, I have just pointed out all the questions of this week's assignment. So if anybody of you don't have any other doubt, I think we can conclude the session. Okay, so I see the doubts are solved and the queries are clear. So thank you all of you for joining the session, paying attention and providing me answers in the chat box. I hope you will do these questions and we'll discuss the answers again in the next class. So see you next week. You can leave the session now.